this week, education is the theme. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah. So before, everything I kind of shut down a few years ago, I actually was a teacher for,
Oh,
for 10 years. So this was something that I was quite interested in because when you start talking about AI in education, the first thing that always comes up is students are going to use this to cheat and plagiarize. That's a legitimate concern. But so much of the conversation has been focused around what students can get out of it. And whenever you start looking into what teachers can get out of it, so much of it is focused on preventing the students from
yes.
using it. And the last thing you want as a teacher is to be in an adversarial position with the students. So, with that in mind, what can teachers use AI for to help speed their workload? And one of the things that takes so much time out of a teacher's week is lesson planning. It is really easy for a lot of people who haven't worked in education to think, okay, yeah, you're working, you're doing 5 hours of class a day, 5 days a week. That's 25 hours. That's a part time job. No, you're doing a lot of lesson planning outside of that. And so some people decided to look into how AI could be used in lesson planning. And so they started with just very simple. Went over to ChatGPT and asked it to plan a lesson for sixth graders on the causes of climate change. Very, but the kind of place that any teacher would start with a lesson plan. A very vague idea. And it worked. They got a lesson plan within just a few seconds. ChatGPT generated an objective for the lesson plan. There was a list of materials needed, assessment ideas, a full 80-minute thing. It included direct instruction, guided practice, independent practice, broke it all down into 10 to 15 minute chunks, materials, PowerPoint presentation on the causes of climate change, internet access for students, introduction, 15 minutes, practice, 20 minutes of having them make a model, going over everything. What this turned out is technically a lesson plan. This would be enough for me to not teach a class, but to get started with preparing.
So this came from plan me a lesson. Like it was that vague. The initial input that they started with was just plan me a lesson.
For sixth graders
Sure.
on the cause of climate. So there is some specificity there, because at least in the US, there is for sixth grade a predefined amount of knowledge they are supposed to have and supposed to demonstrate. So there's already this rubric established that this AI can instantly access.
So what happens between a lesson plan and what this thing spat out and actually like a lesson being taught?
And that's the big hurdle here is this provides no materials. Like
Okay.
it just says, use a PowerPoint presentation about the subject of climate change. It makes no attempt to provide you that.
Sure.
And that's fine because that's a whole different thing entirely. So from there, you would need to source your own materials or make your own materials. And that's its own step. That's
Sure.
its own thing. So, like, if I got this, my first step would be like, okay, it says a PowerPoint presentation on climate change. Do I have that? Can I find that? Do I need to make that? And the great thing about teaching, if you do it for a long enough time, you just start stockpiling materials. You make it one time, you use it forever. So after 10 years of teaching, I like, oh yeah, of course, I have a PowerPoint on that right here, ready to go. Um, so but you touched on customization with this, which is really important because I actually played around with this a little bit and put in a few more prompts. And you can't like I was like, okay, based on this textbook and based on these articles,
Yeah.
give me a 30-minute lesson plan for high school seniors. And it was able to kind of do that. The more detail you start putting in, you do hit a point of diminishing returns.
Okay.
And another thing worth pointing out is what this spat out, this lesson plan it gave is slightly outdated methodology. It's certainly appropriate. It's not wrong. Like I said, I could teach up. These are the kind of notes I would expect to get from like a teacher who I was substituting for.
Okay. Okay. I like that.
Like it's
Yeah.
enough to work with,
Sure.
but you're going to have to fill in a lot on your own. But it's great for new teachers who don't really have a lot of experience planning lessons because
Sure.
that's really hard. Even if you have the materials and the objective, how do you structure it all together? So this structures it in a way that is good, not great, good.
Got it.
I would probably make use of this. If I were doing teacher training still,
Yeah.
I would teach this as a tool
Yeah.
for newer teachers to look, not work from, but look as examples, as where to go. And you can evaluate these in a lot of ways, but there's good stuff here.
Look, you start off, you have some basic ingredients, maybe a textbook, an objective. You're like, okay, what do I I haven't done a lot of lesson plans. This is my first year. GPT-3 will help you get that scaffolding up. But then, I'm assuming you could just recursively keep solving all of your problems, like PowerPoint on climate change. Well, sure. I mean, GPT-3 could go down that rabbit hole and you could generate that and kind of go through all the.
Sure.
Are there stories of teachers are there people out there that are leveraging this and now doing their job with AI augmentation?
I did not, and I'm going to tell you why.
Okay.
Because any teacher who is doing this is not going to be openly bragging about it. And that's not an ethics or morality thing. That argument aside, this is because admins and parents are understandably skeptical, and no teacher wants to be defending to administrator or a parent why they aren't doing their job by having an AI do this kind of work. Now, I guarantee you there are dozens of teachers out there using this in their job. Dozens, hundreds, thousands. But with the education is a slow to change area, especially public education
Sure.
in the US, which is the limited field that I have access to really referencing. I don't know if it's different in a country. Maybe a country like Estonia, who has been teaching coding to kindergarteners for 10 years, has a different approach. I don't speak Estonian. I can't get on those blogs and access these teachers. I
Sure.
can follow up with US teachers. And administrations are not going to be okay
Yeah.
with teachers outsourcing this right now. So no one's proudly shouting this from the rooftops in lesson plan.
Oh, okay. So I'm assuming that asterisk means that in other areas there is a little rooftop shouting.
So anyone who has worked with kids will tell you that the worst part of working with kids is dealing with parents. And
I didn't
no,
know
it
that.
comes from a really good place because parents always do want what's best for their kids.
Look,
And as a teacher, you are in charge of giving what's best for these kids. And well, you're not going to make everyone happy all the time. Parents are wondering why their kids are, why is my child getting C's? I know they're smart. They should be doing better than this. Is it? And, I'm not going to sit here and say like, oh, parents are bad, teachers are good, all that stuff. That's a whole other argument. But a lot of these emails have to be responded to
Okay.
outside of class time.
Okay.
This is usually done evenings, weekends, in what should be free time. But you need to respond to these emails. You can't just ignore them. You can't ignore parents. And, well, this is where several teachers are kind of on low key finding a lot of help with these chatbots, because you can submit an email and ask it to respond. So somebody submitted a fake email from a
Yep.
parent complaining that their child was getting poor grades because they missed several assignments and they weren't able to turn them in late, even for partial credit. It was a whole, long email, the kind of thing you get every week
Okay.
from a parent. And so they fed this in and asked the GPT to respond, telling the parent that her child cannot submit any late work. No prompt on tone, no prompt on extra stuff, just based on this. And it gave a direct, professional response, to the point, well written, citing exactly why this couldn't be done. It sounds like a form letter. It sounds like the automatic response you get from customer service when you email someone, your call is important to us. Please respond. Like, it clearly not written by a human. If I got this from someone who I had ever had any face-to-face conversation with, I would probably know this is not their tone of speech.
Yeah.
But it's a great template. You
Yeah.
go in there, you give it 2 minutes of editing, you can make it sound like your own tone. It's just the kind of thing that can take a lot of heavy lifting off of the non-classroom part of teaching.
Evaluation? Is that something we're going to get into?
Yeah, that's actually the last thing I've got here, because that's the big one. That's
Okay.
the most obvious one. It is, especially essays, it is the single most time-consuming thing for any teacher. And like, I was an English teacher, so it's nothing but reading and grading and reading and grading. And so somebody decided to see just how well ChatGPT analyzes text, because that's one of the things that it's kind of advertised as doing is text analysis. It's
Yep.
pretty good at doing it with things like code. Talked a little bit about that last week, but prose, language, quite a bit harder. So they put in a 8th grade essay about Romeo and Juliet. 8th grade is, 12, 13 years old, about Romeo and Juliet, and just asked it to rate it and grade it according to standard grading rubrics.
Okay.
It gave it a B plus, which is pretty good. It's about 85, 88%, calling it a solid analysis. It cited the article, the essay's specific quotes, say, oh, the article or the essay accurately talks about the right themes of love and hate and fate and all of this stuff. And overall, looks like it read it and gave a thorough assessment. As an English teacher, I disagree. And so do a few others. I found the person who did this, a 8th grade English teacher in Hawaii, Christina Torres Cottery. She said she gave it a C minus, which is like a 72%. And honestly, I think even that's being a little bit generous. It does not really analyze the text. It looks like it read the Wikipedia page on Romeo and Juliet
Yes.
and then just reworded some of that into something that, it's accurate. Everything it says in this essay is accurate. It is, in fact, about Romeo and Juliet, but it's not good. It's written like a eighth grader who didn't do the homework,
Okay.
who didn't actually read the book, read the Wikipedia page and spat it all out. So there's a huge difference because, yeah, it checks all the boxes, but it's just not good. So the AI gave it a B plus. I'm gonna give it a C minus, maybe even like a high D. It's passing, but not
Got it.
really. But here's the thing.
Okay.
This essay that they fed in was actually also written by ChatGPT.
So it just gave itself a B plus.
It gave itself a B plus. Yeah, so it's evaluating itself very highly, which does kind of like, if this is the quality of essay that ChatGPT is giving out, students are a long way off from using this thing to actually fool
Sure.
teachers. So clearly not written by an eighth grader or even really a natural human. It sounds very stilted. It sounds very fake. And I put in a few better essays. I actually played around with it, and I put in like some very famous short stories like George Orwell and like well written stuff. The evaluations it gives out are surface level, not great. This is not a tool for evaluating content. What it is good for is evaluating specifics.
Okay.
Like, this is good for evaluating degree of language. Like, if you're teaching English as a foreign language, how advanced is this? Oh,
Okay.
this is written at a 12th grade level versus a 6th grade level. This text does not properly utilize these grammar points. There is use here for evaluation, but not for like English literature comprehension.
So if you were to take more of the responsibility here and you came up with a rubric and you said, okay, my evaluation style has 5 different criteria. Criteria number 1, here's an example of performing poorly. Here's an example of it doing really well. Repeat for all 5 criteria. And then you asked it to evaluate.
And that's something I'm going to be writing a bit more about in the write-up, because this same people, they used it to create a rubric for grading a class. What I want to play around with is how that rubric that they create grades stuff, because the stuff I found here was just creating a rubric. They didn't actually try to use it on anything yet.
Sure.
So that's something I want to play around with, because but this is what you're saying is true for people as well. Like, I'm a writer. If you just write me an article on AI, what you get back, it's very likely not going to be what you had in mind. And that's true with people as well. And the thing that I like about using this for content creation is, like you said, I might put in, give me this. I don't like that. I don't like that angle. But, ooh, give me an article now focusing on this. Okay, now we're getting somewhere.
Yeah.
And that kind of, it can help you as a creator to kind of refine your own thoughts into clearer instructions that I can then give to a student to work on, or a writer to work on, or something.
Okay, so evaluation, administration, lesson planning. That makes complete sense. Is there any other areas? Not that we need to get into anymore. I was just wondering if there is other stuff as well that you found teachers found a use for with this.
Yeah, and going even bigger, planning a lesson can be hard. Planning a curriculum,
Mm.
even for an experienced teacher, planning a year-long type curriculum is hard. And especially if you're teaching in a public school setting or a university setting where you are expected to adhere to changing standards.
Yeah.
Standards can change every year, every few years. It might happen where the curriculum that you've been using for 10 years is suddenly no longer appropriate. Standards have changed, whatever. Instead of redoing your whole curriculum yourself, this would be a great thing. This would be a great using the newest revised standards
Yeah.
according to this law or policy, adapt this curriculum to best fit that. But maybe if they extend the weeks, shorten the weeks, or change it from 60 minutes to 90 minutes. There's any number of things that might shift, even if standards don't shift. You as a teacher move from one school to another school. And now instead of meeting 5 days a week for 40 minutes, you're meeting 2 days a week for 90 minutes. That changes your entire curriculum lesson planning. So this could be a great tool for altering entire curricula, provided you can feed it in the data. Yeah.